Welcome to Tucker Carlson Tonight. We're in the business, so we watch a lot of television, and we've noticed a theme. Every day, the organized left and its public relations arm in the media tell us that illegal immigrants aren't just equal to American citizens, they are superior to American citizens. They work harder, they're more noble and deserving, they have more interesting cultures than you do, Mr. White Bread and Mayonnaise. They deserve better treatment. Contrast that to this story. Last week, we got new numbers on the drug crisis in America. It is by far the worst in our history. More than 70,000 Americans died of drug ODs in just the last year. That is a shocking, a horrifying number. But you may not be familiar with it because the press barely covered that tragedy. They don't care, just middle America dying, no big deal. But if you watch TV in the last few days, you have definitely heard of a man called Joel Arona Lara. He's a hardworking, undocumented worker who, for inexplicable reasons, was arrested out of the blue by ICE agents as he drove his wife to the hospital for a C-section. Well, the media pounced. It was a moral atrocity typical of the Trump years, they told us. The Khmer Rouge never did anything so appalling. CNN went on the attack before ICE had even commented on what happened. Watch.
I want to let you know about this story regarding a new baby boy. He is not with his dad today because ICE agents hauled his father away as the family was headed to the hospital where the mom was scheduled for a C-section.
The mother of 5 just gave birth 2 days ago, the same day her husband, Joel Arona, was detained by ICE agents. Shortly after, she gave birth to her baby boy. While he's physically okay, this mother is living a nightmare.
ICE has not yet commented on this incident.
Living a nightmare, a made-for-television tragedy. But it wasn't just cable news. The Hill, Slate, ABC, CBS, many others did exactly the same story. They presented it as a dystopian morality tale. Heartless ICE officers tore a father from his family for no reason at all. They probably were wearing MAGA hats as they did it. Journalist and noted dumb person Amy Siskin summed up the media reaction with this tweet, quote, OMFG, ICE detained a husband as he was driving his wife for a C-section. The cruelty and inhumanity of this regime. Amy added an exclamation point at the end, so you know she means it. Left unasked in any of this was why ICE would want to arrest this guy in the first place. Did they even have a reason? Or did they just do it because they ran out of puppies to kick? Well, it turns out they did have a reason. Here's the reason.
This is far from an innocent victim. This person was wanted by foreign authorities for murder. And like this arrest, most of what ICE does in cities and towns is targeted enforcement. This was a referral that we got from Interpol for a wanted person. We did surveillance to find out where they lived. And when that individual left their home, we made a vehicle stop.
Oh, murder. So the doting father was wanted for murder, homicide, killing someone in Mexico. Actually, it turns out the Mexican government asked the Trump administration to find and arrest this man. But whatever. He's still noble and depressed. He's exactly the kind of person the Democratic Party wants living in your neighborhood, next to you, soaking up your tax dollars. The New York Times, the party's Pravda, said as much. Even after the murder charge became public, that newspaper ran this headline, quote, ICE detained man who was driving his pregnant wife to a hospital. The murder part was buried in the fifth graph after a description of the, quote, outrage and, quote, growing anger toward ICE over the administration's, quote, sweeping immigration policies. That's what propaganda looks like. Artfully disguised lying designed to manipulate rather than inform. And you can tell by how inconsistently it is applied. For example, if you were arrested for murder on the way to your wife's C-section, would the Times attack the cops in defense of you? Probably not. The headline would instead read, murder suspect apprehended. Hooray! The FBI raided Paul Manafort's house on a tax charge while his wife was in the shower. A letter to his lawyer would have been enough, but the feds wanted to intimidate Manafort's family with, quote, shock and awe. The Times wholeheartedly applauded that. Paul Manafort is an American citizen. Nobody thinks he's noble. He gets no break. And neither will you if you were ever accused of doing something wrong. If only you were here illegally, they'd defend you. Richard Goodstein is a lawyer. He advised both of Hillary Clinton's presidential campaigns, and he joins us tonight. Do you think, as Congressman Joe Kennedy of Massachusetts said, that it's inhumane, worse than inhumane, to arrest a man wanted for murder by the Mexican government?
Tucker, I hope we can agree, before I answer that question, because we're talking about ICE, that in deference to our president, we could use perfect English tonight.
I think Americans should use perfect. Well, hold on. Americans should use perfect English. Why is that? Is that racist now to say you should speak English? English language is not a race. It's what holds our country together. It's okay.
Wildly racist for the president introducing a Hispanic.
Language is. This is so stupid.
Sorry.
Language is not a race.
Stupid.
When our ancestors came to this country, they were taught in public schools to speak English because it binds the country together. A country that has no common race or religion. Language holds us together. There's nothing wrong with that. And the left, which seeks to divide us for political gain, pretends it's racist to say you should speak English. It's not.
So the intimation is when you introduce somebody who's Hispanic that he can't speak perfect English, which is why the president went out of his way.
Okay, Trump is bad. Okay, fine. But what's the answer to the question? So ICE arrests somebody wanted for murder by the Mexican government, and it's heartless. How is that heartless?
Yeah, the answer is details matter. When Joe Kennedy said what he said, he wasn't aware that this man was wanted for murder. Just like details matter when you talk about chain migration, it now involves Melania Trump's parents. It involves Stephen Miller's relatives.
What is Stephen? Okay, first of all, let's not attack the relatives of Trump officials you don't like.
I'm not.
I think it's enough to assess people on what they. Hold on. Let's not bring people's families into this. Stephen Miller's not responsible for his lunatic uncle, and Melania's not responsible for her. I mean, you know what I mean? Like, we're responsible for what we do and say. So let's keep it to that. But let me ask, seriously, why, even after the New York Times found out that this guy was wanted for murder, the Mexican government had asked the Trump administration to arrest him. They didn't note that until paragraph 5 and instead made it about the abuse at the hands of ICE that he suffered. Why is that not propaganda? Seriously.
You'll have to take that up with somebody who writes or edits for the New York Times. I can't defend how they present which information in which paragraph. The fact is, once we know that the guy was wanted for murder, the facts change. But again, I think the reason this is being played up.
Wait, but hold on. We always knew that. Hold on. The facts didn't change. The facts drove the events. He was accused of murder by the Mexican government. The Trump administration was asked to arrest him and did so, again, at the request of the Mexican government. You could have known that if you'd asked ICE. Nobody did. And the presumption was that this guy was arrested because, I don't know why, they had nothing to do today other than arrest people on the way to the birth of their child. I mean, it's like insane, actually. Don't you think? Like, why did no one ask?
Well, I don't know that that's a standard question. Was this person wanted for murder on Interpol? But
if an American citizen, hold on, American citizens are arrested all the time. If I got arrested tonight for not paying my stupid red light camera tickets, which I really don't want to pay and shouldn't have to, but if I don't, I get arrested. Are you going to say, they just unfairly arrested Carlson? No, you're going to be like, you broke the law, you got arrested. American citizens don't get the presumption of innocence that illegals do. Why is that?
Look, that's an exaggeration. I think the reason we're talking about this, Tucker, is because the walls are closing in on the president, and this is an issue he thinks he can make hay out with his base.
I don't care what the president thinks. I think this is outrageous. I think we have a right to enforce our own laws. I don't think we should sit back and get invaded by foreigners. I don't. That doesn't make me a racist. It makes me an American.
I bet there were very few times on your show over the past 5 or 6 years of the Obama administration you reported that it was net mass outflow to Mexico rather than people coming in.
Mexico is one among many countries that sends its poor here. Who cares about Mexico? 1/3 of all El Salvadorans live in our country. 1/3 of the entire population of living Salvadorans live in America. Okay, so it's not just Mexico. That's just silly, right? I mean, let's be real. Let's be honest here. We have a right to enforce our own laws, don't we?
I'm just saying there hasn't been the full reporting. Just like you're saying there wasn't the reporting of this fellow being wanted for murder, there hasn't been the full reporting of the immigration. No one's talking about the fact that Donald Trump said Mexico is going to pay for the wall. He's talking about shutting down the U.S. government because of funding for the wall that he said Mexico was going to pay for.
We haven't built the wall. Please. I mentioned it many times. I'm upset about it. I wish we would. Richard, once we do, you can stay. I promise. It's great to see you. Thank you
so much. Appreciate it.
You're welcome. Mark Stein is an author and columnist. He joins us tonight. I wonder, Mark, we've been kind of casting about for who's going to run as the VP candidate for a Democrat in 2020. Why wouldn't it be an illegal alien accused of murder? That's kind of the perfect distillation of what the party stands for right now, I would say.
No, I think that's absolutely right. That's where we're. By the way, for those red light tickets of yours, Tucker, I'm willing to rent you a pregnant illegal alien to sit in the passenger seat as you drive around Washington, D.C. I bring about 200 of them across the border. They're doing the jobs that Americans won't do, which is sitting in the passenger seat with you to serve as your pregnant passenger as you go around holding up liquor stores and all the rest of it.
My pretext to break the law.
You know it makes sense.
Yeah. So, what do you look? I hate doing show after show about the faults of the press because, in the end, who cares? They're just journalists. If they were smart, they'd be in private equity or whatever. But I do think this is worth unpacking this for a second. To write a story about this and not mention that he's wanted for murder until the fifth graph, isn't that just lying?
I think it is, but I think it's that the sentimentalization of public policy, which is what immigration is. It's no different from, building another runway at the airport or expanding the highway. It's a matter of public policy, which we should be able to discuss rationally. For example, this couple have been illegally in the United States for 12 years, and they have 5 children. So simply, if you're playing the odds, you've got roughly, whenever you pull them over, you've got roughly a 50-50 chance of them being pregnant. That's actually very demographically revealing of where California is headed. 2 people who shouldn't be in the country have nevertheless had 5 anchor babies in a country where the fertility rate is 1.75 children per couple. So actually, this is California's future. And it is actually a snapshot of where this insane sentimentalization of public policy has got us. When they say she's living a nightmare, she's living a dream. She's been here for 12 years, had 5 children at public expense that your viewers, assuming for the sake of argument that there are any legitimate U.S. citizens and lawful residents remaining in the country, that your viewers have paid for. So that's the nightmare she's living. She's had 5 children at public expense, married to an illegal husband who apparently works for a company that makes bouncy castles for children's parties. And actually, the only people who need bouncy castles for children's parties are families like this one, which have had 5 anchor babies. This is a snapshot of the insanity of the sentimentalization of the immigration issue.
Such a smart point. And don't complain about it or you're immoral. Mark, thank you. You'll be back, I'm glad to report, in just a minute to discuss Chelsea Clinton's plans to run for office. You thought you'd never be able to elect a Clinton again. You might be able to. Up next, though, an NSA whistleblower says that the intel agencies are lying to the press, to the president, and to each other. And he would know. He joins us next. Plus, Ann Coulter is here tonight to launch her new book about the left's addiction to outrage. That's ahead. Well, since he lost a security clearance he never should have kept in the first place, the former CIA director John Brennan has positioned himself, almost described himself, as a martyr, a blameless truth teller being nailed to a cross by the president's wicked regime. Bill Binney has another perspective. He is a former technical director at the National Security Agency, the NSA. In a recent interview, he said the U.S. intel agencies have become, in effect, a Praetorian Guard that lies to the press, to the president, and even to each other. Bill Binney joins us tonight. Mr. Binney, thank you very much for coming on. You're in a position to know, which is why it's so interesting to ask you this question. But do you think that elected officials have full control over the intel agencies, that they are constitutionally empowered to fully control?
No, they don't. In fact, they really can't tell exactly what's happening behind the walls. Once they close those walls, everything's done in secret. And they only know what the intelligence agencies tell them.
I mean, that is, by definition, an assault on our democracy, isn't it?
Yeah, it is. Yes, they have no effective way of finding out and verifying what they are being told is true. This is true for the FISA court, too. I mean, as early as August of 2002, the FISA court discovered the FBI had lied to them over 75 warrants they had asked for. And so, and they have no way of verifying it.
I mean, this is the nightmare scenario that liberals spent like 30 years worrying about. I don't even know what your politics are, by the way, and I don't care. But are you struck as an observer by the degree to which the media has taken the side of unaccountable intel agency bureaucrats over the public?
Well, I think they're doing that just to support the argument against President Trump that they believe in. I mean, I for myself, I refuse to join the growing numbers of mentally impaired people with emotional positions that can't change.
Huh. So do you think that there's any way to bring these agencies under some kind of democratic oversight?
Yes, but they have to be legislated. I mean, the Congress, we proposed to President Obama in January of 2014, one of the ways he could do that would be to have a set of technical people that would be responsible to the government and the courts outside of the agencies, but have all the clearances to go into any intelligence agencies and look at any database or any system they're using or what they're doing with the data. At any time, so that they have carte blanche to go anywhere they wanted. But none of the agencies would really accept that unless they're forced to. And that's really got to be it. They have to be forced to.
Yeah, they're not in charge of our country. Voters are. Bill Binney, thank you very much.
Yeah.
No, they're not. And they shouldn't.
Oh, thank you.
Great to see you.
Yeah.
Well, for close to a year, the Justice Department official Bruce Orr has been a central figure in the drama around the Steele dossier. Orr has direct ties to Christopher Steele, and his wife, of course, performed work for Fusion GPS, which commissioned the dossier in the first place. But in an effort to downplay his connection to the story, the press keeps describing Orr as an obscure mid-level DOJ official. Really, because, in fact, until last year, he was Associate Deputy Attorney General, as obviously a top post. Eric Felton has been following this story from the very beginning for the Weekly Standard, and he joins us tonight. Eric, he's been described as a minor player at DOJ. By whom?
Yeah. Well, the New York Times, in a couple of stories this last week, tried to downplay as much as possible Bruce Orr, calling him a mid-level employee at the Department of Justice, calling him a nearly anonymous person in the 113,000 employees at the Justice Department. What they didn't mention was that he was one of the associate deputy attorney generals. And what's interesting about that office is there are always two associate deputy attorney generals who are career employees, and then there are several that are political appointees. The career employees, which Orr was, that is the highest rank a career employee can have in the Justice Department. So Bruce Orr was not some mid-level employee of the Justice Department. He had the single highest rank that you could have as a career employee in the Justice Department. He was frequently in press releases put out by the Justice Department. The notion that he's deep in the bureaucracy and been plucked out of obscurity by President Trump shows that either the New York Times doesn't know how the Justice Department is structured, which is unlikely, or it's that they're being dishonest with their readers, which would be shameful.
Have they correct? I mean, because that's factually incorrect, as you just laid out, is just to restate what you just said. It's the highest level a career employee can reach. Have they corrected the story?
Not that I've seen so far.
That's just unbelievable. When you pay close attention to the news coverage of a subject you know a lot about, does it drive you a little crazy?
Well, you know, what's funny is that they keep referring to Bruce Orr as little known. And he is little known if you read the New York Times or the Washington Post, where they don't tell you about Bruce Orr. They don't tell you that he was the source who was funneling information from Christopher Steele to the FBI long after the FBI was telling the FISA court that Christopher Steele had been closed as a source for misbehavior. And yet they were secretly, Bruce Orr was collecting information, bringing it to FBI agents, and the FBI agents were on a nearly weekly basis writing up official 302 memorandums. Those are official FBI memoranda. That they were writing up of the Steele information that Orr was bringing them.
It's unbelievable. I bet our viewers don't trust the media, but if they knew all the details, they'd trust them even less. Eric Felton, great to see you. Thank you for that.
Tucker, thank you.
Big tech opposes free speech. That's become very obvious in the last week. John Stossel knows what it's like to be on the wrong side of that, to be targeted for what you think, because he has been. He joins us next with his story. Stay tuned.
If you're a liberal, you're supposed to be for free speech. That's free speech for the speech you hate. That's what free speech means. We're losing the thread of the concepts that are important to this country. If you care about the real American or you don't. And if you do, it goes for every side. I don't like Alex Jones, but Alex Jones gets to speak. Everybody gets to speak.
Alex Jones gets to speak. Well, on YouTube, Facebook, Twitter, and elsewhere, non-compliant voices are being silenced, many of them. And yet somehow very few institutional conservatives in Washington are standing up to defend them, though, of course, they are likely to be next. Bill Maher is not a conservative. He's a liberal, mostly with dumb ideas, but he does have principles, so he is one of the rare people willing to bravely stand up for an unpopular man, which is the measure of bravery, whether you're willing to stand up for something that is unpopular. President also entering the fray. Today he said, quote, "I won't mention names, but when they take certain people off of Twitter or Facebook and they're making that decision, that is really a dangerous thing because it could be you tomorrow." Well, John Stossel knows what it's like when it turns out to be you, when big tech targets you. Every week he makes a new video, what he puts online on Stossel TV. YouTube has been putting disclaimers on some of those videos. John Stossel joins us tonight to explain. Disclaimers on your videos. You've been doing this for decades. You've been making television that is controversial for decades. Have you ever had a disclaimer on any of it?
No, not until now. And it's not exactly a disclaimer. It's a link to the Wikipedia page for global warming. In this case, somehow all the other controversial stuff hasn't required a disclaimer, but global warming stories now do.
So what have you said that YouTube, Google, believes is so unacceptable that they need to flag it and warn viewers that you're probably lying?
Well, this week when I discovered it was on mine, I thought it was about me. But actually, they're putting it on everybody's posts that talk about global warming. They've decided this one subject needs a link to the Wikipedia page. And Wikipedia is usually pretty good, but this page has been captured by the alarmists, and it's very one-sided.
So what does it tell you when the people in charge don't allow dissent on a topic? What does it tell you about them? Why wouldn't they allow a free debate if they're so confident that they're right?
But to be fair, they're allowing the debate. They're not censoring me. They're just saying, we're sending a signal that this Stossel guy, he may be misleading you about global warming, and you better check Wikipedia. So I'm happy. Look, they can censor anybody they want. It's a private platform. I don't want them to, and I think the consumers will punish them if they do. But that would be their right. So far, they're only saying, this is a notice. Check out Wikipedia.
So we want to put that up on the screen just to give our viewers some sense of what we're talking about. So here's a video you put up that includes this show. And the warning is this: global warming, also referred to as climate change, is the observed century scale rise in the average temperature of the Earth's climate system and its related effects. Multiple lines of scientific evidence show that climate system is warming. It really is like a cigarette smoking is bad for your health warning on the pack. And it does affect how you enjoy each Marlboro. I mean, this does affect how people view your videos, don't you think?
Yes, and I say it's warming. I just say there's nothing we can do about it now, and the money we're spending is wasted. I'm glad you put that picture up because Axios posted that picture and said, John Stossel known to give false scientific information. They finally took that down, but they've left your picture up.
Huh. That's it. So basically what they're saying is if you have questions about the cause of it or what we can do about it, we need to warn the public about you. You're dangerous.
And anybody who talks about it, we better warn the public because Wikipedia knows the answer. And Wikipedia spins it in a way that all the models predicted the correct warming when, in fact, they haven't.
John Stossel, thank you very much for that and good luck. I believe you. America's trade war with China is heating up. A lot of former U.S. officials, though, are taking China's side and getting rich doing it. That's not betraying our country somehow, really? Why not? We'll get into that next. Well, China is working hard to overtake the United States as the most powerful country in the world economically and militarily. It's a struggle that will define future generations for Americans. And yet, remarkably, not all Americans are taking their country's side in this conflict. There are plenty of high-level American officials now on China's payroll, many of them. For example, Mickey Cantor was U.S. Trade Representative from 1993 to 1996. He was a close advisor to Bill Clinton. Now he's on the advisory board of a Chinese smart TV manufacturer. As we've covered on this show, Marco Rubio, among others, fears that these televisions could be used to spy on Americans. It's not a crazy fear. Meanwhile, former Congressman Rick Boucher, a Republican of Virginia, works as the lead lobbyist for Hikvision. That's a Chinese video surveillance company, because that's not creepy or anything. Even former House Speaker John Boehner is a pro-China lobbyist now. Barf. Bill Gertz is a senior editor at the Washington Free Beacon, and he joins us now. Bill, you've heard a lot of people say in the past couple of months, so-and-so is betraying his country, acting against American interests. Here you have a bipartisan collection of people who are demonstrably working against America's interests, and that's okay in Washington? How does that work?
It's a huge problem. China's information and influence operations have been extremely effective. They're literally buying up former officials. They're utilizing coercive measures to get U.S. businessmen who have interests in China to do their bidding, and very little is being done about it. I mean, we hear a lot about Russian influence operations. What China has been doing over the last 30 years is huge compared to what the Russians have done in terms of influencing the U.S. government. They've literally changed the direction of American foreign policy towards China.
And it's terrifying. And unlike Russia, China actually has promise of overtaking the United States as the preeminent nation in the world. They're our rival. They're a threat to our interests. So why is it socially acceptable for Rick Boucher or Mickey Cantor or John Boehner, God help him, to lobby openly on behalf of China? Why does nobody say, well, wait a second, what are you doing acting against America's interests?
Well, up until the Trump administration, there was this narrative through successive Republican and Democratic administrations. The big propaganda theme was China is not a threat. Trump has come out and said, hey, look, the emperor has no clothes. China is a threat. And it's not just limited to these former officials and congressmen and former commerce and officials and the like. They're actually going after former military officials. There's a program called the Sanya Initiative, which was launched about 10 years ago by the former vice chairman of the Joint Chiefs of Staff, Admiral Bill Owens. And he basically has made tens of millions of dollars in China, and he formed this organization of former military officials who literally lobbied Congress and the administration to do China's bidding.
That is so deeply corrupt that we're going to follow up on that story, and I hope you will come back to tell us more about it. Bill Gertz, thank you. That's shocking.
Thank you.
Well, the Trump administration has, in less than 2 years, turned the American left from the opposition into the resistance. How'd that happen? Ann Coulter's wrote a brand new book on that subject, Resistance is Futile. She joins us next. We've come now to the quiz portion of tonight's show. The game is simple. We're going to play two pieces of video for you, both from MSNBC over the weekend. You watch them and you tell us who's dumber. The first comes from preacher without a church, Al Sharpton. Sharpton once worked as James Brown's road manager, so he knew Aretha Franklin well. As part of his tribute to the deceased soul singer, he said this.
So in the words of my late friend Aretha Franklin, show some R-E-S-P-I-C-T.
Did you catch that? Watch the short version again. Pay attention to the spelling.
Show some R-E-S-P-I-C-T.
Al Sharpton doesn't have much of a formal education. He started preaching as part of a road show with Mahalia Jackson during elementary school. He never learned to spell even simple words. He frequently makes up verbs out of thin air. If you've watched his show, you know he doesn't read the teleprompter well and couldn't if you held him at gunpoint. Now, Michelle Goldberg of the New York Times, by contrast, is unwaveringly eloquent. She's got an advanced degree from one of our country's most prestigious universities. She's written a couple of books, one attacking Christianity, the other praising abortion, that lots of critics loved. She writes for the most famous newspaper in the world. If you were in journalism and you got 100 on every test they gave you, you'd be Michelle Goldberg. She's the best our system produces. Here's what she said on MSNBC.
This is the most vocal president, at least in real time, that we've had in recent memory, right? He is the leader of the free world.
Oh, no, he's not. He's not the leader of the free world, but sorry. Well, he's part of a bloc that includes Vladimir Putin, Duterte.
Well, he's not the rounding people up and murdering them without any, due process.
He'd certainly like to.
Anyway, I don't think you can say that definitively.
So who's dumber? It's not really close, is it? And it's not the guy who can't spell respect. He's not stupid. That's why he's been able to game our system for so long. But the other one, Michelle Goldberg, isn't gaming our system. She is our system. That's why her comments and countless comments like hers are so fascinating. Our ruling class loses control in the presence of Trump. It becomes clinically hysterical. What a normal person might consider embarrassing or buffoonish, they find existentially threatening. They abandon reason and proportion and decency. They don't even make sense. What is that about? Well, the short answer is that Trump terrifies them. These are people whose main talents are glibness and obedience, and that's enough to succeed in the globalized economy. That's what the system requires, lemming-like conformity, and that's what they deliver. They're not very impressive. On some level, they know they're not very impressive, and it worries them. Instead of trying to become more impressive, more creative and useful, they maintain their rule by bullying, even as they place themselves outside the bounds of criticism. It's been a very good deal for them. And then 2 years ago, and seemingly out of nowhere, Donald Trump showed up, half unhinged, and started saying all sorts of forbidden things, some of which were demonstrably true. This threatened to expose their ill-gotten power and privilege, and that scared them. They're afraid because they know they're guilty. They've watched the country decline as they have ascended, just as the rest of us have watched. They know what they've done. They understand exactly how much they have to lose by changing the way things are. And that's why they're yelling so loudly. Ann Coulter just wrote a brand new book called Resistance is Futile, How the Trump-Hating Left Lost Its Collective Mind. It's out tomorrow. We're honored to be the first stop on her book tour. And it's great to see you. What is forensically looking at the anti-Trump left?
Well, I think your description just there describes the never-Trumpers beautifully. With the left, I think it's more that they really do hate deplorables. They hate the Walmart crowd, and that's what they see in Trump. They're able to attack the gun culture and Walmarts and middle-class, middle Americans by attacking Trump without getting called on it because, technically he's a billionaire who's president. But really, at the bottom of it, they just think he's icky. And so they go on and on about this existential crisis facing America and Russian collusion without allowing anyone else in their little closed set, so that even smart people, as you point out, they become crazier and crazier, and they are rewarded for being crazy, as John Brennan and Clapper and Comey were. I mean, at one point, it was the left who wanted to chop those three up and feed them to the dogs. And all they had to do is start sending unhinged tweets, as John Brennan has, and suddenly he's a hero. I go through in my book not only all of the lies Brennan has told and why he was hated, and for good reason, as head of the CIA and just constantly lying. Left really hated him. Then as soon as he starts sending those crazy tweets about Trump being, treasonous and history will judge you. I just have one sentence of the names he was called after that. One of the most honored men, MSNBC, deep credibility, CNN. Suddenly it's a Cinderella story. Isn't that happy? Isn't that great? They welcomed him back.
Can I ask you a question that I've been thinking about for the past year and a half, and I don't know the answer? So the group that the left hates most, the middle classes, you just correctly said, the group that Trump represents, is also the group doing the most poorly. The middle class is dying and shrinking. Its life expectancy has declined. Why don't they feel sorry for the middle class?
It is their hatred of Trump has caused them to lose all reason. I mean, it seems to me it used to be, well, both political parties would claim to care about the working man, the middle class family. Both political parties used to want to defend the border. Both political parties used to attack the concept of anchor babies and illegal aliens committing crimes and legal aliens committing crimes. But I mean, you do kind of worry. Trump had this uncanny ability to raise important issues that Americans care about, but it's getting to the point. I mean, now, you know, my governor says America wasn't ever great. If that's what he's driving them to, part of it is, of course, that's what their base, or a large portion of their base, wants. But I really wish we could sit down, liberals, and ask them why. I mean, I'm not a waitress at Wendy's. I'm not a union bookkeeper, but I care about my fellow American. Why don't they?
Well, it's a great question. It's an obsession of this show, and I honestly don't know the answer. But I do agree with you that it does seem like Trump, among other things, has totally corroded their own standards. Like, they will say anything. I mean, you can make a case against Trump and tell the truth, but they don't.
Yes, I mean, if the resistance were smart, I think they would read my book. It gives them excellent advice, which is attack Trump on the stuff he's actually done. Don't keep, as my friend Joe DeVito says, it's a buffet. Don't keep bringing your own food to the buffet. There's plenty there to attack. You don't need to make things up, but they make things up, and the stories get crazier and crazier, and as luck would have it, I don't have a job, so I can spend months going through Nexus to see the complete insane contradictions of them saying the dossier is it's proved. We know it's true because it was used to get a FISA warrant. It was used to get a FISA warrant on Carter Page. And then 10 months later, we find out that the dossier was Hillary Clinton funded research. And suddenly, where did you get the idea that the dossier had anything to do with this investigation, with the warrant on Carter Page? And, I have the quote side by side, 10 months apart.
Oh, I bet you do. Because I read your column. And what people who know you on television may not know is that you write your own stuff. And you are a brilliant writer, and I mean that. I think even people who disagree with you would agree with that. So I hope this book sells a ton of copies. It's out tomorrow. Resistance is Futile, greatest title of a book this year. Thank you, Ann Coulter. Great to see you.
Thank you for having me on.
Oh, it's an honor. Mark Steyn rejoins us after the break to discuss something that nobody in America wants to talk about, the possibility of more Clintons running for high office. Stay tuned.